We started thinking about how all these things fit together back in 2019. We had an invitation from Morgan O'Brien, who was CEO of Peoples Gas. He was concerned that Peoples didn't understand the intersection between food and energy and what should they be thinking about as an energy company as it related to food. But one of the biggest segments of the Pittsburgh economy are actually food-related businesses. And we did a report that broke it out into three segments. One was to talk about the role of what we now call controlled environment agriculture, which is all things having to do with growing plants indoors. Second thing we looked at was the value chain and the food system and the food economy. We got to the third section, and that's when we all sat down and said, okay, so how do we end this thing? The big players in European food economy, like Barilla, they all underwrite these open source, open networking institutes where people could come together and come up with new ideas and new ways to think about organizing the food economy. Industry, government, and academic and scientific research all sort of focus together, and just about every country has at least one or more of these institutes. When we did the white paper, we called it Food 21. So brilliantly, we kept Food 21, and that's what we called the organization. Then we began thinking about how we wanted to organize this center of activity. It should be focused on increasing the amount of intersections between everybody in the group. In other words, asset-based community developments. You don't try to create a new class of assets. You actually go out there and try to reconfigure the fact that all these assets exist within silos and they don't communicate very well with each other. And so that became a guiding principle. Second guiding principle is that we need to come up with ideas that essentially increase the amount of diversity and inclusivity in the food system, because it is neither of those things. People that could benefit the most from an active growing food economy typically are on the outside looking in from an economic, jobs, business development perspective. It actually turns out that it's one of the best sectors in the economy that if you want to change the rules and increase the amount of inclusivity in the economy, you should start with food. Food and hospitality shouldn't be an afterthought. It actually should be your first thought. We started bringing together a group of people that we all knew. I'd say we had a kick-ass formational group. Our founders included Meredith Grelly from Wiggle Whiskey, Audrey Morell, Penny Zacharias, who was an attorney with Guire Woods. We brought in Rita Ressick from Laurel Vista to become our resident farm expert. So we had all those dimensions of the economy represented in the formational board. And that was February of 2019 when the board met for the first time. We spent the last 2.5 years trying to figure out how to take advantage of the craft beer industry. Pennsylvania, I think, is either number 2 or number 3 in terms of the number and volume of craft beer brewers and brewing activity in dollars and cents, right? We know that it's made with all natural raw materials. It only has like 3 major ingredients other than water, which is malt, hops, and yeast. And we were doing some exploratory on this with a guy named Dan Conroy, co-founder of Great Lakes Brewing Company. And so we're sitting in the room and we said, so Dan, he said, you're like Mr. Local. Joe, he said, the only thing local about my beer is the water. I didn't know very much about this space other than to say, is there an opportunity there? And he said, look, if you guys can figure out a way to create a scalable source of locally raised malt and hops, if we can begin to move people to the local side of this conversation in the beer industry, we could actually begin to build a vertically integrated regional ingredient economic system for beer. Vince Mangini basically took it on himself to plan our first attempt to grow barley. Our barley's grown all the time because barley's a cover crop, but the farmers are basically either growing it for feed or they're growing it for no-till agriculture. If they can get cash off that field, now they're getting cash crop 12 months a year. They get a whole extra harvest. There's only one malter in southwestern Pennsylvania, and that's CNC Malt, and they're up in Butler. We got it done, we malted it. And Vince took it over to All Saints Brewery, which is a small craft brewery outside of Greensburg. And we made our first beer with it at All Saints. It was called Old Hannistown. And they were able to get their hops from the Thomas Jefferson National Forest. It was pretty close to being a regional local beer, and it tasted pretty good. So we felt that justified going to the next level and ramping it up to more production and higher yields and more volume. And then it turned out that Giant Eagle was already in conversations with the folks over at Pittsburgh Brewing Company that were getting ready to open finally this huge state-of-the-art brewery over there in Creighton. So they got into the conversation. Then we spent the next 6 months working on the branding, the labeling, the recipe, and all that stuff. And as of Labor Day weekend, we released our beer, which is called Harvest PA. And in the midst of all this, we also established a brand for ourselves, which we call Allegheny Mountain Malt. While all that was going on, we met with another company called Zilka. Zilka is a wholesale bakery goods distributor. You know how many breweries you're driving by on your way to the bakery? He said, so we can stop and sell malt to all these craft breweries. So we became their exclusive local malt. And of course, there's a long tail to this story because nobody's ready to flip the switch and take your malt and throw anything out. So this is going to take some time. I think it did what we wanted it to do, which was basically tell the story of what a regional value chain looks like, and in a way that's really easy for somebody to understand it without getting into a lot of complexity. You can see all the moving parts, and like I said, these are all parts that already exist. The brewery's already in existence, Zilka as a distributor is already in existence, the farmers are already in existence planting barley, they're just not making any money off of it. The malt store is up in Butler, was looking for more product that they could malt. The missing piece was having somebody connect all those dots and connect them so that they're all working in sync with each other. And that's what we did.